It's early March 1947. In Lahore, Muhammad Ali Jinnah arrives as the undisputed leader of the All India Muslim League and the man demanding the creation of Pakistan. The provincial government in Punjab has just collapsed. The British governor has imposed emergency rule, and across the city, Muslim League supporters take to the streets to protest what they see as the denial of their democratic mandate. Jinnah does not lead the demonstrations. He watches carefully. From his residence, reports arrive hour by hour. Clashes between crowds, attacks on shops and homes, police units struggling to keep order. Jinnah's public position is controlled and legalistic. He insists on constitutional process and negotiations on the legitimacy of Muslim political demands. But the streets of Lahore are moving faster than the talks. Within days, the city begins to fracture along communal lines. Mixed neighborhoods empty. Fear replaces politics. British officials warn that Punjab is slipping out of control. To them, Lahore is no longer just a capital, it is a warning. For Jinnah, this moment is pivotal. The possibility of a united India governed by compromising is fading. The logic of Pakistan, once a negotiation position, is hardening into a necessity. What happens in Lahore in March 1947 does not decide partition on paper, but it makes it real. And from this point on, the question is no longer whether India will be divided, but how much violence will accompany the division. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm so happy you're here. If you're interested in geopolitics, here I talk about global power shifts, strategic competition, and forces reshaping world affairs. I recently visited Pakistan for a friend's wedding, and it made me want to explore in a video how Pakistan and India obtained their independence, the challenges they faced, the tensions that still exist today, and whether peace is possible. India and Pakistan are nuclear-armed states whose relationship has been defined by conflict since their creation in 1947. They fought multiple wars, experienced recurring military crises, and remained locked in territorial dispute over Kashmir. This conflict is not limited to bilateral hostility. It intersects with regional power shifts and geopolitics, nuclear deterrence, and internal political dynamics. This video examines the historical origins of the rivalry, the military and strategic evolution of the conflict, the underlying political and ideological drivers, the broader geopolitical environment shaping the states, and the limited but persistent forces that reduce tensions and enable cooperation. By the mid-19th century, the British Crown controlled most of the Indian subcontinent, ruling over an extraordinarily diverse population with hundreds of languages and multiple regions, and sharp regional, economic, and cultural differences. British governance relied on divide and rule strategies, intentionally fostering religion, caste, and social divisions, particularly between Hindus and Muslims, to prevent a unified anti-colonial movement. They fostered non-religious schools, which pushed a lot of the Muslim population outside of the education system, leading to impoverishment, and conducted selective political representation. Over time, this hardened religious identities, particularly between Hindus and Muslims, which previously had been more fluid. In this context, Indian nationalism rose, and the Indian National Congress was founded in 1895. Initially elite and moderate, it gradually became the main anti-colonial force, and it was dominated by a majority of Hindu, although it was officially secular. Its key figures are Gandhi and Nehru. Muslims, and especially elites and landowners, feared becoming a permanent minority in a democratic India. This fear intensified as the British introduced representative politics. So they created the Muslim League and the idea of Pakistan in 1906. Initially, it sought Muslim safeguards within a united India, but gradually it radicalized as Hindu-Muslim tensions increased. They developed a two-nation theory articulated most clearly by Muhammad Ali Jinnah Hindus and Muslims were not just religious groups but distinct nations. Shared territory was not enough to form a single political nation, and Muslims required their own states to ensure security and self-determination. And from this emerged the concept of Pakistan. Coined in the 1930s, it envisioned a homeland for Muslims in northwest India, Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, and northeast India, Bengal. Importantly, these regions were not contiguous. They were separated by 1,600 kilometers of Indian territory. It is in the 1940s that it all unraveled. At the 1940 Lahore Revolution, the Muslim League formally demanded separate states. And Great Britain, which had been weakened by the Second World War militarily and economically, was searching for a rapid exit. Although there were efforts to find a common solution with One India, such as the Cabinet Mission Plan in 1946, it was envisioned as a three-tiered federal structure with a weaker center and strong provincial grouping, aiming to reconcile Congress unity with the Muslim League's demand for autonomy. But it collapsed due to mutual distrust, fear of central dominance, and escalating violence in 1946 and 1947. This included riots in Calcutta, Punjab, and Bihar that killed thousands even before independence. British authorities concluded that a united India was no longer governable. In August 1947, British India was split into India and Pakistan. And Pakistan consisted of West Pakistan, which is modern Pakistan, and East Pakistan, which is modern Bangladesh. The partition triggered one of the largest migration in history. 14 to 15 million were displaced, 1 million killed, and there were widespread sexual violences, and ethnic cleansing happened on both sides. So to partition India into two different nations, the Radcliffe Line was established. It was named after Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a British lawyer who had never been to India, and yet chaired the Boundary Commission, which was given only 5 weeks to complete its work. So the borders were drawn hastily, poorly surveyed, and announced after independence, trapping populations. This trauma deeply shaped regional politics. So Pakistan faced structural problems immediately. Geographic absurdity, two wings separated by India, no shared language or culture, only united by religion. Political imbalance. East Pakistan had a lot more people than West Pakistan, but West Pakistan controlled the army, the bureaucracy, and the capital allocation. Plus, Bangladesh suffered from cultural discrimination. The Bengali language and identity were marginalized. Urdu was imposed as the sole national language. This planted the seed for future conflicts in the 70s. So what happened is that during the 1970 elections, the Awami League from East Pakistan won an absolute majority. But the Pakistani military refused to transfer power and cracked down on its political opponents, which culminated with Operation Searchlight in March 1971, where Pakistani soldiers and local pro-Pakistan militias killed between 300,000 and 3 million Bengalis and raped between 200,000 and 400,000 Bengali women in a systematic campaign of murder and genocidal sexual violence. Intellectuals were also targeted, and millions of refugees fled to India. Hindus were also targeted with the intention to create an ethnically more uniform area. India intervened after the refugee crisis and border clashes happened, and Pakistan was defeated in December 1971, and as a result, Bangladesh became independent and Pakistan permanently lost its eastern wing. This showed that religion alone could not sustain a nation, and that linguistic, cultural, and economic factors matter more. So back to the independence of India and Pakistan, the process was rushed and violent. Approximately 14 million people were displaced and up to 2 million people were killed. More than 560 priceless states were required to accede to either India or Pakistan, but Jammu and Kashmir, a Muslim majority region ruled by a Hindu monarch, delayed its decision. Following incursions by armed groups from Pakistan's northwest, the ruler acceded to India in exchange for military support. This led to the First Indo-Pakistani War. A UN-mediated ceasefire in 1949 divided Kashmir along the ceasefire line, and that is more known today as the line of control, and the dispute remains unsolved. But it remains at the heart of the tension between Pakistan and India because it holds strategic, economic, and symbolic importance. Strategically, it borders Pakistan, China, Afghanistan, and India. It contains headwaters of rivers critical to Pakistan's survival, and its terrain offers military advantages. Kashmir is predominantly mountainous, with elevations exceeding 5,000 meters in many areas. Kashmir sits astride several critical mountain corridors. Historically and today, control of these routes determines who can move forces in a crisis. Plus, control of high ground provides superior observation and surveillance, early warning of troops movements, artillery and missile positioning advantages, and mountain terrain favors defensive forces. And there are two lines in this conflict: the line of control between India and Pakistan, and the line of actual control between India and China. Kashmir functions as basically a strategic buffer. For India, it creates depth between Pakistan and the Indian heartland, preventing direct access to Punjab and northern plains. For Pakistan, control over western Kashmir prevents India from pushing forces closer to Islamabad and protecting Pakistan's core military and political centers. Politically, scholars and policy analysts consistently describe Pakistan's official narrative as seeing Kashmir's accession to India as an unfinished business of partition, rooted in the idea that a Muslim majority territory was meant to join Pakistan. Pakistan's Kashmir policy has long emphasized plebiscite-based self-determination under UN resolution, reflecting the view that the partition outcome was incomplete without resolving Kashmir's final status. On the other hand, India views Kashmir as an evidence of its secular and territorial integrity. Analysts point out that India, as a secular republic, uses Kashmir to demonstrate its inclusion of diverse religions and ethnic groups within its territorial framework, showing that a Muslim majority region can be an integral part of a secular democratic India. And official Indian policy repeatedly reaffirms that Jammu and Kashmir is an integral and an inalienable part of India, and that the dispute with Pakistan is strictly bilateral and should not involve third parties. So this dispute has progressed through several phases. The First Indo-Pakistani War began on October 1947 after armed tribal militias from Pakistan's northwest frontier, supported by elements of the Pakistani military, entered the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. Facing internal revolts and external invasion, the Maharaja of Kashmir acceded to India in exchange for military assistance. Indian forces were airlifted to Srinagar and pushed back the advancing fighters. The conflict escalated into conventional fighting between India and Pakistan across mountainous terrain. In January 1949, the United Nations brokered a ceasefire, halting the fight and dividing Kashmir along the ceasefire line. India retained control of approximately two-thirds of Kashmir, and Pakistan controlled the remainder. The ceasefire did not resolve sovereignty, leaving the dispute open. In 1965, the Second War ended without territorial change. It was triggered by Pakistan's attempt to alter the status quo in Kashmir through covert infiltration and insurgency, known as Operation Gibraltar. The strategy assumed local uprising would weaken Indian control, but this did not occur. India responded by escalating militarily across the line of control, and later the international border expanded the conflict into Punjab and Rajasthan. Both sides deployed large conventional forces, including armored air and air power. After weeks of intense fighting and mounting losses, international pressure, particularly from the United States and the Soviet Union, led to a ceasefire. The subsequent Tashkent Agreement restored pre-war territorial positioning, resulting to no significant territorial changes. In 1971, war resulted in the creation of Bangladesh, and in 1999, the Kargil conflict involved limited high-altitude warfare between the two nuclear-armed states. After 1971, Pakistan acknowledged India's conventional military superiority, and this later shaped its strategy. And from the late 1980s onward, Pakistan emphasized asymmetric tools. This included support for insurgent groups in Indian-administered Kashmir, while denying official involvement and maintaining the pressure below the threshold of conventional war. India attributes multiple major attacks to Pakistan-based groups, including the 2001 Parliament attack, when militants linked to Pakistan-based groups attacked India's Parliament complex in New Delhi, killing security personnel and triggering a 10-month military standoff between India and Pakistan, involving large-scale troops mobilization along the border. There was also the 2008 Mumbai attack, where Pakistani-based militants targeted multiple locations in Mumbai over 3 days, killing 160 people and sharply escalating tensions, while exposing gaps in regional counterterrorism and crisis response. In September 2016, militants attacked an Indian army base in Uri in Jammu and Kashmir, killing 19 soldiers, after which India conducted cross-border surgical strikes against militant launch pads across the line of control. And in February 2019, a suicide bomber associated with a Pakistan-based militant group killed 40 Indian paramilitary personnel in Pulwama, prompting Indian airstrikes inside Pakistan and a brief aerial confrontation between the two states. Most recently, in May 2025, a 3-day military escalation was triggered by India's Operation Sindoor, a missile campaign launched in retaliation for a deadly militant attack in Kashmir. While India claimed to be targeting insurgent infrastructure, Pakistan responded with its own offensive, Operation Bunyan al-Marsus, leading to the first ever direct drone battle between two nuclear-armed nations. The brief engagement caused significant casualties on both sides and sparked global fears. Ultimately, a ceasefire was negotiated within 72 hours, halting the immediate violence but leaving the underlying regional tensions completely unresolved. Each incident resulted in heightened military readiness and limited retaliation. Another important fact is that both states tested nuclear weapons in 1998, but while India declared a no first use doctrine, Pakistan did not, citing India's conventional advantage. Experts estimate that the possession of nuclear weapons by both states reduced the likelihood of a full-scale war, keeping confrontations at a low conventional level, but it increased frequency and limited military engagements. And overall, there is a higher risk of miscalculation during crisis with much more severe consequences. And the 2019 Balakot crisis can demonstrate this dynamic. So following the Pulwama attack, India carried out airstrikes on what is described as a militant training camp in Balakot inside Pakistan, leading to Pakistani retaliatory air operations, the downing of aircraft on both sides, and rapid de-escalation under international pressure. India crossed a previous threshold by conducting airstrikes deep inside Pakistan proper, not just across the line of control, signaling its willingness to use limited conventional force despite nuclear risks. Pakistan responded militarily, but in a calibrated way, conducting air operations intended to signal capacity and resolve without causing large-scale casualties or provoking further escalation. Both sides controlled the scope and duration of their actions, avoiding attacks on major military or civilian targets that could have forced a broader war. The escalation followed quickly, driven by the risk that further escalation could spiral into nuclear confrontation and by diplomatic pressure from external actors. The India-Pakistan rivalry is also somewhat shaped by wider regional and global forces. India, as a regional economic and demographic power, seeks regional dominance in South Asia and a leading role in Indo-Pacific security and global governance. And while the country has always emphasized strategic autonomy, more recently it has developed partnerships with the United States, Japan, Australia, and Europe, especially in reaction to China's own hegemonic ambitions. China has close ties with Pakistan and invested a lot in the country under the Belt and Road Initiative. India's military modernization and economic growth reinforce its regional position, and Pakistan increasingly views India as a long-term strategic challenge rather than a short-term rival. On the other hand, Pakistan faces economic constraints, internal security challenges, and conventional military inferiority relative to India, which has mainly a larger manpower base, defense budget, industrial capacity, and conventional military assets, leaving Pakistan unable to match India in a prolonged or large-scale conventional war. To offset this, Pakistan heavily relies on nuclear deterrence, asymmetric warfare, and strategic alignment with China. China-Pakistan cooperation, mainly through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, China's 15 years and $62 billion investment in Pakistan, is a flagship project of its Belt and Road Initiative and provides economic support and strategic depth. And China has territorial disputes with India, and maintaining close ties with Pakistan creates a triangular dynamic which complicates crisis management and increases the risk of escalation. And internal political dynamics also reinforce rivalry. In India, Kashmir is tied to nationalist politics. Kashmir functions as a core symbol of Indian sovereignty and national identity, making it a focal issue for political parties, especially Hindu nationalist ones, to demonstrate resolve and patriotism. Strong responses to Pakistan carry electoral benefits. Military strikes or tough diplomatic postures toward Pakistan are often framed as decisive leadership, which can mobilize voters and translate into long-term electoral gains. Territorial concessions are politically costly and perceived as softening on Kashmir risks, leading to accusation of betraying national integrity and exposing leaders to political backlash and weakening their legitimacy. In Pakistan, the military's institutional power is linked to the Indian threat. The enduring rivalry with India provides the Pakistani military a strategic rationale for its dominant role in national security and especially politics. Kashmir legitimizes defense spending and military influence, framing Kashmir as an unresolved existential dispute justifies high defense budget and sustained military involvement in governance. Civilian governments have limited control over India policy. Decision-making on India and Kashmir is heavily shaped by the military establishment, constraining elected leaders' ability to pursue independent diplomatic initiatives. Since the nation's independence, the Pakistani military has acted as the ultimate arbiter of power, frequently transitioning between direct junta rule and a hybrid model of governance. Even under civilian administrations, the military maintains a de facto veto over national security and foreign policy while managing a vast commercial empire that makes it the most powerful economic force in the country. This pervasive influence has created a system where elected leaders often struggle to exercise true authority without the explicit blessing of the top brass. These incentives reduce flexibility and compromise. Despite persistent rivalry, several factors limit escalation and occasionally bring the two sides closer. First, the mutual nuclear vulnerability discourages large-scale war and encourages crisis de-escalation, as a nuclear war would have terrible consequences on both countries. Military hotlines, ceasefire agreements along the line of control, agreements on notification of missile tests and nuclear accidents are mechanisms that reduce misunderstanding during crisis. It is worth noting that the Indus Water Treaty had resisted crisis and conflicts since 1960, that is until April 2025, when India decided to place it in abeyance. This was an unprecedented move justified by cross-border terrorism and marked a major shift from 6 decades of cooperation, though the treaty technically remains in force under international law. Limited trade, though constrained, continues intermittently, and cooperation occurs on specific humanitarian and technical issues. Additionally, both countries still share languages, food, music, and historical memory. There are cross-border family ties, and pop culture, including films and television, retains audiences on both sides. These ties do not resolve strategic disputes, but they provide channels for people-to-people engagement. Finally, external actors, particularly during crisis, have repeatedly pushed both sides toward de-escalation. The India-Pakistani conflict persists because partition left foundational disputes unresolved. Kashmir remains central to a national identity for both sides, and power asymmetry drives asymmetric strategies. Nuclear weapons prevent war but entrench rivalry, and domestic and geopolitical incentives favor confrontation. At the same time, nuclear deterrence, institutional safeguards, and cultural ties prevent the conflict from escalating uncontrollably. The relationship is best described as a managed rivalry, not as a peace process. Without structural political change or shifts in strategic incentives, the conflict is likely to continue, periodically intensifying, then stabilizing without resolution. So thank you for watching this video. I hope it was informative, and I will see you very soon in the next one. Bye!